And so we're both on here, and we can't see each other, but we can hear each other. So I think we're doing okay. And uh, let me. So everybody who's come on to watch this, we had a little technical difficulties. Jimmy and I can't see each other, but we can hear each other through a phone line, and yet I can see that you can see us. So that's that'll be part of the fun of this, and that means we're kind of flying off the cuff here a bit, Jimmy, because we didn't get to. We were dealing with technical difficulties instead of talking about what we were going to talk about. So uh, starting at 11:30. We're a couple of minutes late, and here we go. So, this is Jimi Calhoun, and I'm Phil Wyman, and this is the Wild Theology Podcast. And I'm coming from Long Beach, California, and Jimmy is coming from Austin, Texas. And this is my funky brother. In saying that, so Jimmy's a pastor, an author, and a musician, and you played for some pretty hot bands, Jimmy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you.
Okay. So you played for some pretty hot bands. Parliament Funkadelic. Wow. I mean, this is some good stuff. Rare Earth, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So people are probably a little interested in some of your music history. You want to just give a little bit of that?
Well, yeah, I started playing in San Francisco, California, and the bands I was involved with were Parliament and Rare Earth, Creation, Dr. John, and the Buddy Miles Band.
Wow.
And with Buddy, I played with Jimi Hendrix, and let's see, that's about it.
Dang, that's that's quite a lineup, bro.
I dated myself, yeah.
You may have, but that's quite a lineup. You got that says you got some chops. So, and we need to get together and have some fun at some point here. So hopefully that'll be soon. And these days of quarantine and social distancing and no festivals will stop. Huh?
Yeah. That's quite a challenge.
Yeah. So you're also pastoring in Austin, Texas, and working with. Is it the homeless population there?
No, that was primarily through a festival I was involved with. And,
okay.
Bridging Austin's really about bridging wherever there's a divide, and that can be homelessness, but it's primarily with people living with the differently able community and racial reconciliation, I guess you would call it.
Right.
As my friend and I were talking this morning, it's really about seeing the diversity within even Christianity, making it more of a common occurrence where it's not so much sibling rivalry most of the time, where we're competing for market share.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what Bridging Austin's about. You see my T-shirt here.
Yeah. So you're in a bit of a different state of quarantine or stay-at-home orders in the state of Texas than I am in Los Angeles. Things are pretty strict here in Los Angeles, and I know in Austin it's tends to be stricter than the rest of the state of Texas. But we've seen it. Rallies at the Wisconsin State House to open up the state, in Michigan, and then you had Alex Jones, the conspiracy theorist radio host, being there at a rally in Austin to say, "Hey, open up Texas." Protesting against stay-at-home orders and quarantine and whatnot. People who are saying this is not as severe as it's being propounded to be by the government and by the medical field. Had people arrested in San Diego and North Carolina for encouraging protests and organizing them. Um, and then you've got the state of Texas made big news when the governor declared churches to be essential businesses, and so they could keep meeting. And that's not the only state. You got
When did that
Georgia and
happen?
Florida. That happened a couple weeks ago. I don't remember the date, and apparently Austin is not included in that. So,
Well, Austin's not included in a lot of things, Texan, but
right, Austin's not Texas. Right.
I didn't say that.
So I know, but I know people who do say that.
Yeah, I said included. Now, whoever's
Right.
doing the including, that's on them.
Right. So you and I were talking a week or so ago, and you made a mention of some pastors calling you to talk about civil rights and these orders, these quarantine orders. Churches getting together, and you had some rather different thoughts about it than I typically hear people say. So, what are you thinking about all of this?
Well, what I'm thinking and what I can put into language is probably a little bit different. Even using the term civil rights connotes a time and an era in my youth when people who look like me were marching and protesting for more inclusion at a legal level.
Right.
And so then what my friend called about, he's a white gentleman pastor in Oregon, what he called about was civil liberties.
Right.
At a constitutional level, and just about how much, quote, freedom we experience and live with in America. And for many, the story we tell ourselves about the American experience is one of continual progress and more freedoms and liberty, just being opened up to more people in decade after decade after decade. It's a march towards just this utopian free society. And
Right.
what he was talking about as he spoke with me was he didn't realize that most of the things that he assumed weren't applicable to me most of my life. And he just kind of took it for granted that I experienced the same amount of freedom to be where I wanted to be at any particular time that he did.
Right.
And so this quarantine is really about spatial distance. Some of it here they call it social distance, but in reality, it just kind of means you can't occupy the same. You can't be within 6 feet of somebody else. You can't be in close proximity to someone, and that's basically what the Jim Crow laws were. You had to be spatially distanced along skin color lines. And so my take on being told to stay a certain amount of feet away from other people is not really new. It's not new to me. And
right.
So in that context, the words, the terminology we use, and for the people protesting, if they see the Constitution as central, well, then obviously, as written, the government doesn't have the authority to come in and tell the people, the citizenry, where they can go and what they can't do.
Right.
The only problem is, constitutionally, we've lived, well, we probably lived 300, however many hundreds of years where the Constitution was abridged to suit the national interest of a particular racial group. So therefore, we have what I would call an antinomy. We have two competing truths that independently they're both true, but in reality they're kind of contradictory, right?
Right.
So then what do you do with that? Where do you go?
Right. Yeah, and a point was made by one journalist who works on constitutional issues that the word emergency, any of its cognates or similar words, just aren't found in those places in the Constitution that we're talking about.
Uh-huh.
And so in a sense it's like, what do we do with that? That would be our out, right? In order for the government to say, sorry, you can't do this that you would normally have the right to do. So you have these two sides beating their heads against each other. You can't tell us not to, and the other side saying, yes, you can because it is for our safety. Um, and and yet you have an entire segments of society, just like you're talking about, been there, done that, and this was not the greatest thing when it was happening. And there's two ways to look at that. Do I live with this because, hey, it was a part of life and it should be no big deal to you because we're trying to save people? Or is it, no, this is a big deal to me because I've been here, done that, and I don't appreciate it? Um, where, where, where do you find your friends falling in the spectrum?
Yeah, yeah. The most interesting thing to me, and the people who were uncomfortable being quarantined or
Right,
being uh, asked to separate themselves or segregate themselves, self-segregate,
right,
is that it's the first time they've experienced anything, and they find it repugnant or repulsive. They just don't think it's the right thing that should happen to them. They've never ever
mm,
been not allowed free access to American soil. They had the right to be wherever they wanted to be.
right,
And in
right,
my book, I talk about the word being. It it infers participation. If we're going to be together, that means we're going to participate in something together. So being and belonging kind of mean that you get to do and be around,
mm,
and I don't want to conjugate the word be too much, but the for the first time in um, a lot of white people's experience, that's not the case, and cops will wonder why they're out. If they're walking too close to somebody else, they'll be looked at with suspicion.
right,
If they have too many people over at their house, they'll be looked at with suspicion.
right,
Too many cars, and you can't have more than 10 people in your house, certain places. And
right,
if there's 7 cars, you do the math and go, wait a minute, there's a high probability there were a couple of couples there, and
right,
so what do I do? Do I turn them in?
sure,
Or, yeah, and so all of those things being viewed with suspicion. I think the last time when you were speaking with Alan Hirsch,
right,
I chimed in with the fact that for the first time, white people were looked at as if they had some sort of disease. Somebody might be a
right,
virus carrier.
right,
So when you're walking through your favorite supermarket like Safeway, if you get too close to somebody, you're not a person anymore. You're a walking germ, and you're to be
yeah,
avoided. And there again, that's not something new to me. I've always
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah,
so or people who look like me. I mean, we know what it is to have people who think it's natural to want to be a safe distance away, particularly if you're male. That
right,
you might be violent or prone to some sort of crime.
right,
So,
right, right,
yeah, I'm watching this and thinking, if there was an old adage when I grew up, if you live long enough, you'll see everything come around. What goes around comes around, and those kind of
right,
sayings. And I'm watching it and I'm saying, there might be a little more truth in that than I used to just pass it off as an old saying, but maybe it's a true saying. If you live
sure,
long enough,
sure,
you will see uh, what what happened to one is going to happen to you. So you better be careful what you're
Right.
willing to accept. Eh?
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So you probably have some pretty. You must have some examples of this on a personal level that you've had to live through that have cost you
that have
over your
what?
life, that have cost you something over your life. That you can say, here's an example where I was experiencing this social distancing as a, just because I'm black, and
Well,
it's cost me, right?
a few months ago, well, I don't know if this cost me, but I walked out to get the mail, and the
Right.
mailbox is situated really close to the street. There's no curb where I live. It's just the mailbox is there, and
Yeah.
maybe 18 inches more, and you're in the street. And across the street, which is a 2-lane road
Hmm.
that has a rec lane for recreation. So there's an additional little. It's not really a lane, but it's 7. No, not that. It's 2 feet. So enough
Right.
for 2 people to run with each other. There was a white lady running, and she was walking as I went out to the mailbox, and the closer we came to meeting, then she took off running. And then when I got my mail out and started back, and I thought, oh, I'll see how far she ran. And she stopped when she got a safe distance away. Ooh. And I just thought it was funny, but that happens a lot. You cross the street, you hear door locks. You get on an elevator, and you can really feel how uncomfortable people are.
Mm.
You're always given extra latitude. Make sure that
Right.
you're comfortable. And when you're
Right.
in white spaces, they make sure that you have enough space that you want. So social
Right.
distancing is not new. Um, there was jokes all the time. Just all you have to do is, if you want a nice, comfortable seat, is just go sit, and if you get on an airplane or a bus or something, the seat next to you will be the last one filled. Those are just the
Hey.
little things that
Right.
people don't think about. Usually when we talk about race issues, it has to be pulled out of a car and stomped and beat, or
Right.
those kind of things. But it's the little things that that happen daily. The distancing, the spatial distance that grate at you.
Right. Right.
And then you go through, I don't know what the number would be, but maybe like 200 in a row, and then you might finally say something and get angry. And the anger that's expressed wasn't necessarily over that incident that particular day. It's just built up, pent up experiences where one day you just don't really feel like it. You want to
Right.
go,
Yeah.
really? You really? Are you doing that? Yeah. And to the person that day, it seems like, wow, that fellow's really angry. Calm down. Yeah, but what they don't understand is just because they've never experienced it. And
Right.
that's really the big thing about what's going on right now. Everything that's happening to the majority of Americans has happened to people who look like me and the native population of America.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
that it's a good time.
Yeah.
If you're uncomfortable with what's going on, it's a good time to reflect on the fact that everything that is happening has happened to others.
Right.
Everything, right down
Right.
to staying 6 feet away. We went to the market, I think, Sunday, and now
Right.
they have lines painted to make sure everybody can tell what 6 feet is.
Mm.
And they don't let
You're
you in the
right.
door, so they have you stand there, and 60-year-old people are standing there like now you can take a giant step.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
We've
a
got.
game we used to play as a kid, and it's hilarious to me.
Yeah.
Except for the fact, when I was a kid and living in Arkansas, that the theaters were segregated, so I went in the back door. They told me which door I could use and what floor of the theater you could sit in, and it was completely separate but equal, as they were saying.
Yeah. Yeah. We've
Mm.
got the stickers on the floors in the supermarkets here that mark.
Oh, you do?
They say stand here. And they're 6 feet apart, so
Yeah,
so
all
people
right.
will know to have their social distancing. Yeah,
Mm.
and some of the stores are only allowing so many people in based on square footage of the store. Walmart started doing that, uh, so there's some interesting stuff. So, Kat, we know Catherine Camisa. She makes a statement that it's going to become a stop and identify state. And are you tested? And what are the results? This kind of stuff's going to come in, and that doesn't particularly seem different than certain segments of your life, huh?
Well, no,
Yeah.
that's pretty routine. I don't really know how
Right.
to. Yeah, I find it a little bit funny that we look at things about testing. That's become one of the solutions. Is that
Right.
if we were tested? Well, as far as a virus is concerned, I can be tested, and when they get the results back at 9 a.m. and then kiss, give a hug to my next door neighbor at noon and be reinfected.
Right.
I'm not really sure what long-term goals outside of a false sense of security we're going to get out of that. And so, at some point, people are just going to have to open up, and the corollary is this: that we make solutions for racial distancing, like let's have a picnic
Right.
once a month, or my church will come over to your church and we'll share a service. And these stopgap measures, well, you still leave, and then for the next 31 days, you'll probably still socially distance.
Right.
And so that
Right.
we're good at coming up with short-term solutions to long-term problems.
That don't actually solve any of the problems. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you were to conjecture looking ahead um, at how things are now, the people around you, how they're responding to this issue, and conjecture ahead in terms of how do you think people will respond in the future? Is this going to change our prejudices? Just add another one to the list? Are people like me with bad allergies going to become the new leper that you have to stay away from?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, or or is there a potential here for resetting our minds to see the world in a new way? I like your idea. This is a good time for us to meditate on the fact that some people have lived like this their whole lives, and potentially that gives us some transformation
Yeah.
on a personal level.
Yeah.
But how do you see people responding to this?
Well, first I have to do a book plug because I have a new
Oh,
book
yeah,
that came out
absolutely.
in February, in February, called "The Sounds of Love and Grace." And
Yeah.
yeah, but here's a passage from it if I can figure it. Let's see. Not long ago, I became interested in the way people have used science to advance race theory. One article theorized that Negroes had a disease that was particular to them called dysesthesia aethiopica, which produced rascality, meaning someone prone to troublemaking. The symptoms of this disease were said to include much mischief, which appears to be
Oh, wow.
intentional, but
Yeah.
is mostly owing to the stupidness of mind and insensibility of the nerves induced by the disease. And since there was no known cure for the disease, that dreaded disease, more separation from the diseased population was deemed prudent. And I thought, well, the book, I turned it into publisher in December, but
Right.
so there was this disease that's inherent to people who look like me, and we just have it. and it makes us rascals and people to be avoided, to be separated from. Nothing I can do about it. I can't take a pill and
Right.
get rid of it. There's no known cure. But how much is like what we're talking about COVID? I mean, the fear right now, why it's not like another virus, or we perceive it to be not like another virus. We think it's whack to call it a virus, like a virus. It has to be its own niche. It's
Right.
a special virus. We want to give it. This because we don't have a vaccine to make us feel safe from it.
Mm.
So the analogy is it's there's no known cure. If we had a vaccine, we would think that the vaccine cured the disease,
Right.
and it inoculates some and makes them not get it or severe. But I don't know that the germ would still be around, just like that dreaded disease of blackness is still around. So
Mm.
until we can come to a place where where we know there will always be germs and there will
Right.
always be black people, and those things
Yeah.
are going
Yeah.
to happen, and they will be around hopefully as long as there are people, and not so much the
Absolutely.
virus, but if we approach it that we're going to have to learn to live with it and take appropriate measures, of course, but if we think there's some way that we can separate ourselves, because that was the cure for this disease in the book, was separating ourselves. So that
Right.
went with legal separation, um,
Right.
de facto segregation, then self-segregation,
Right.
and it never really mattered whether it was state sanctioned or just
Mm.
private choices. All the civil rights movement did was identify state-sanctioned segregation and label that as bad.
Right.
But self-segregation and private choice got a free pass as
Yeah. Yeah.
far as
Yeah. Yeah.
being highlighted as something that we need to work on. And my sense is that that's going to be the same thing as you were talking about. Walking in with allergies and having, you're going to walk into a place, and if you sneeze twice, you might be subject to a beating. So take you out and give you
Right.
a thrashing.
Right.
But full disclosure, we moved here to Austin from Florida, and I'd
Yeah.
never experienced allergy symptoms, and I didn't know that I was moving into one of the allergy hotspots.
Right.
And so we would go into eating establishments, and I'd see people, their nose running, and they're continually going hand to nose and doing this, and I said, "How disgusting!"
and,
I
and
I assumed that they were ill, and they just didn't want to take the time off, and they had no regards for the well-being of anyone. Little did I know, 2 or 3 years later, when the allergen started getting to this fellow, that I wasn't going to be able to control it like I thought people should control. So,
absolutely.
I don't know.
I have 60 years of that, bro.
Oh, okay, all right, Well,
Not,
it was new to me, and
yeah.
I got judgmental too fast. I mean, real quickly. So there's a lesson about. So all of my
Yeah.
judgmental friends, I can even relate to you.
Okay, I'm all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, this is causing me to think through a number of the people that I've worked with over the particularly last 10, 12 years as I've been doing festival work. Um, they fall into categories that Christians have been afraid of. Witches, the gypsies in the UK, your dirty kids, and your hippies and rainbow gathering. The traveling homeless population, and there is a distancing that because I've in some sense become part of these tribes. There's a distancing that I've experienced that people have been afraid to be around me because he's the pastor who hangs out with the witches. There's got to be something wrong with him, right? Um, and I'm wondering to what degree these things magnify. If you've already got a population that's considered scary to be around, and then you add new social distancing factors, well, they're probably more likely to be the kind of people who have this thing, right? The
Yeah, one of
homeless.
the things. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
No. One of the things I did notice, I've tried to avoid media the last 3 or 4 months. I've just not been
Right.
paying attention. I've been concentrating on music and writing and other things. I intentionally just disconnected because I didn't want to get sucked into this wave of stuff. But I did notice our mutual friend Paul Metzger. He asked me to look at some news headlines and about civil rights issues and how coronavirus, as is affecting black people at a greater ratio than whites, and so that I could come up with some cogent ideas about it. And so I did. I did a little research, and that's happening at like in Chicago and New York and those places where the disproportionate amount of African American people are dying or being hospitalized with coronavirus, COVID.
Right.
And but once again, what should that continue? How is that going to be interpreted by a white pastor living in Boise, Idaho, or Denver? Or no, I shouldn't say Denver. Smaller rural places.
Sure.
Are black people more susceptible to the disease because of an inherent biological difference, to whereas their immune systems are, quote, either inferior or lacking along with the rest of it, or because they probably never thought about the spatial difference to start. And the simple thing in New York was, well, the majority of white people had cars and didn't rely on the subway as much to go as far a distance. And so naturally, if you're in confined quarters, you're going to be more exposed to any airborne allergen or pathogen or whatever it is, however you characterize it. And so there are other reasons why things happen than the visceral, just immediate response. Oh, well, it's happening to that group, and that's because they're just fundamentally different.
Right.
And that's what scares me. That it's just going to be one more arrow in the quiver to shoot at people who look like me as a reason to kind of distance ourselves from them and view them as suspect. Because if I'm walking down the street and if I'm white and I'm walking down the street and I've heard the stats and I see two whites on one side of the street, I think I should cross the street away from the black because he's more likely to have the disease because of the way he looks.
Right.
I might be a black cattle rancher from New Mexico who never came in contact with anybody with the disease. I don't know how much of a cattle rancher make.
Yeah. So I'm gonna close on that thought. But what I'd like you to do is give us information about your book, where we can find out more about you.
Oh, yeah. It's called The Sounds of Love and Grace, and you can go to jimicalhoun.com, Jimi like Hendrix, .com, and you can find it there, or Amazon, or Barnes and Nobles, and all of those good places. That would be good.
Okay, awesome. And then just so everybody knows, this is Phil Wyman. This has been Wild Theology. I've been with Jimi Calhoun. He rocks. You want to check out his book, and as you can tell by this dialogue, he's got some intelligent things to say. That quote you read out from your book was brilliant. So thank you for that, bro.
Yeah.
And it's good hanging out with you. So, and you can find me both on YouTube, Phil Wyman on YouTube, and this uh, podcast for those who come in late and want to hear the whole thing. It will be available pretty soon on Facebook, and it'll show up on YouTube as well. So thank you, Jimmy. You rock,
Yeah, good
bro.
speaking with you again, my brother.
Yeah, yeah.